What would you do if you discovered your identical twin had betrayed you and gotten you kicked out of your family home? You might cut them off completely, but would you refuse to give them a life-saving organ when they desperately needed it? One man did exactly that, and his ice-cold revenge might just be the most justified on our list. Hello everyone, welcome to Wow Amazing. In this video, we will explore most extreme revenge stories. But before we begin, we would like you to subscribe to Wow Amazing and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on amazing and entertaining content that will surely get you amazed. Now prepare yourself, because this video is absolutely packed with tales that will make you think twice before wronging someone who might have more patience and creativity than you expected. Number 10, Burning Bush. Let's begin our countdown with a reminder that family favors don't always mean family discounts, especially when hard work is involved. It's a warm summer in Australia, and Reddit user Necromancer has agreed to tackle his aunt's overgrown yard for a reasonable fee of $200 per week. Not the most beneficial arrangement, but family is family, right? For 4 punishing weeks, our protagonist works under the burning Australian sun, clearing brush, trimming trees, and transforming what was essentially an outdoor jungle into a manicured paradise. By the end, his back is aching, his hands are blistered, but at least he'll have $800 to show for his efforts. Or so he thought. When the time comes to collect his well-earned payment, his aunt reveals her evil side with devastating clarity. "I'm using the full family discount," she says with a smug smile that suggests she believes blood relation entitles her to free labor. Necromancer is stunned. 4 weeks of sweat and toil, and she's refusing to pay a single cent? What options does he have? Take her to small claims court? Undo all his hard work somehow? His aunt clearly thinks she's won this battle of wills. After all, what's he going to do about it? The answer comes at midnight that very evening, when she's awakened by an orange glow illuminating her bedroom. Racing to the window, she discovers her entire carefully landscaped garden engulfed in flames. While she couldn't prove it was her nephew, they both knew the truth. The landscaping she'd refused to pay for was now nothing but ash and cinders. As they say in the gardening business, that's what you call a controlled burn, or perhaps more accurately, a scorched earth policy. Number 9, hard to stomach. Have you ever opened the office refrigerator, excited for that delicious lunch you packed, only to find it missing? It's really annoying, isn't it? But most of us just leave an angry note and move on. In 2008, Reddit user Gustafson was working in what he described as a really crappy call center. The rules were strict, the ventilation was non-existent, and the pay was so low that employees had resorted to stealing small items to make ends meet. This petty thievery extended to staff lunches as well, and it had gotten completely out of hand. The situation was so dire that some employees had begun spiking their food with laxatives or spoiled milk to discourage the thieves. But even these unpleasant surprises hadn't stopped the rampant food theft. Then one day, Gustafsson noticed a container in the refrigerator with a very clear warning label: "Do not eat, rat poison inside." Most people would notice such a warning, assuming it was either a joke or that the owner was using the refrigerator to store something non-edible. But the lunch thief, apparently believing this was just another bluff, and ate every single bite of the food. The horrifying reality of the situation became clear later that afternoon, when a female employee suddenly collapsed on the floor, suffering from severe internal bleeding. This wasn't a practical joke with laxatives. It wasn't spoiled milk. Someone had actually laced their food with actual rat poison, and the unfortunate thief was now paying a terrible price. The woman was rushed to the hospital, where she survived but suffered long-term damage to her digestive tract, kidneys, and liver, even though no one ever found out who put the poisoned food there. But it's pretty clear that worker will never steal lunch again. Remember, folks, stealing someone's lunch might seem like a minor offense, but you never know when that seemingly petty crime might lead to an encounter with something far deadlier than mayonnaise past its expiration date. Number 8, bug-off children can be absolute terrors, especially when they decide to target someone for no reason. At around 11 years old, Reddit user Frumpy Fungus was looking after his little brother one peaceful Saturday afternoon when 2 neighborhood kids knocked on his door, inviting him to come out and play. When Frumpy declined their invitation, these little monsters didn't take the rejection well. They kept ringing the doorbell incessantly, and when Frumpy still wouldn't respond, they escalated to throwing rocks at his house. Because that's the typical kid's logic, right? This harassment continued for 2 more weeks. Then the rock-throwing kids crossed a line. They cracked one of the windows on Frumpy's house. Now, what these pint-sized tormentors didn't know was that Frumpy had an unusual hobby. He was an avid ant farmer, and among his collection was a thriving colony of fire ants. If you've never had the displeasure of encountering these creatures, their name isn't metaphorical. Their bites feel like someone is pressing a lit match against your skin. Seizing the opportunity for perfect revenge, Frumpy took his glass ant farm to the pile of rocks the kids regularly used as ammunition and emptied the entire colony over them. Later that day, right on schedule, the sound of rocks hitting the side of his house began. But then, something wonderful happened. The rocky barrage suddenly ceased, replaced by the sweet symphony of children crying in pain as fire ants swarmed over their hands and arms. The rock throwers fled home, and Frumpy might have considered the matter settled. But these kids weren't done yet. Instead of throwing rocks, they began stealing toys from Frumpy's yard. Bad move. Our young entomology enthusiast still had more insects in his arsenal. He filled an old book bag with Legos, dolls, and other attractive toys before leaving it conspicuously in his yard. Hours later, the bait was taken, the bag had vanished. But what the thieves didn't know was that Frumpy had dumped his entire termite farm inside as well. A few weeks later, karmic justice manifested in the form of a massive quarantine tent covering the thieves' house. If you've ever dealt with termite infestation, you know that fumigating an entire home can cost thousands of dollars. Sometimes revenge is sweet. Other times, it eats through your house's structural supports and empties your parents' bank account. Number 7. Bad eggs. While children can be annoying, teenagers can elevate irritating behavior to an art form. In a cold Alaskan neighborhood, Reddit user Alaska Guyan K was dealing with a particularly frustrating group of teens who thought it would be hilarious to throw eggs at houses during the winter. What made it even worse was the timing in -15 degrees Fahrenheit weather. The eggs froze solid as soon as they hit the houses, making them almost impossible to clean off until spring. Tired of trying to scrape frozen egg from the side of his home, Alaska Guy came up with a plan to fight back. He and his brother bundled up in warm clothing and positioned themselves on the roof of their house armed with paintball guns, waiting for the eggers to make their next move. Their patience was rewarded when the teens arrived, eggs in hand, ready to continue their sticky campaign of terror. But before they could launch a single egg, Alaska Guy and his brother opened fire with their paintball guns. The teens ducked and dodged, but something unexpected happened. They began screaming in genuine pain and ran for their truck. As they sped away, the rear window of their vehicle suddenly shattered. It wasn't until Alaska Guy was back inside his warm house that he realized what had happened. The paintballs had frozen solid in the extreme cold, transforming them from relatively harmless paint-filled projectiles into rock-hard missiles. Fortunately for Alaska Guy, the police never came knocking. And unsurprisingly, the eager eggers never returned to that neighborhood. Sometimes the best revenge is served at precisely -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Number 6. Familial Revenge. Family gatherings can be uncomfortable at the best of times, but they become unbearable when you're the designated punching bag for everyone's jokes. Reddit user Why Daw You Red Names, whom we'll call Max, had endured years of his cousin Randy's relentless mockery at every family function. What made it worse was that the rest of the family just watched it happen, never once telling Randy to back down, even when the jokes crossed into outright cruelty. To outside observers, Randy seemed to have it all: a beautiful house, a loving wife, adorable children. Yet he still felt the need to belittle Max at every opportunity. Quite pathetic for a grown man, wouldn't you agree? Fate presented Max with an unexpected opportunity for revenge when he spotted Randy in public with his arms wrapped around a woman who was definitely not his wife. Seizing the moment, Max pulled out his phone and captured several incriminating photos of the couple holding hands, hugging, and engaged in passionate kisses. Rather than confronting Randy immediately, Max had these photos printed and waited patiently for the next inevitable family gathering. With the entire clan seated around the dinner table, Randy was about to launch into another round of humiliating Max when suddenly, Max calmly dropped the stack of photos onto the table. The room fell silent as Randy's wife, children, and the rest of the family slowly realized what they were looking at. Then absolute chaos erupted. There was screaming, crying, and physical altercations. Max was promptly kicked out of the gathering, but the damage was done. In the months that followed, Randy's wife divorced him, he lost custody of his children, and to add a final touch of poetic justice, Max got married in an event to which Randy was conspicuously not invited. The family joke, it seemed, was now on Randy. Number 5. IR sucks to be you. If you want to truly destroy a business, sometimes all you need is a phone call to the right government agency. In the early 2000s, a Reddit user named FancyCat11 was fresh out of college and starting a new job at a small drafting and design firm. While the pay appeared reasonable on paper, she quickly discovered she was being exploited, functioning as a receptionist, office manager, file clerk, and even janitor, all for the price of one entry-level position. Despite being obviously overworked, she persevered without complaint. But as tax season approached, her boss made a strange request. He asked her to file for a tax deadline extension on her personal returns. His explanation seemed reasonable enough, so she agreed. However, when she followed up weeks later, he asked for yet another extension. The suspicions aroused, FancyCat11 began investigating and discovered something alarming. All her tax paperwork was already completed. Her boss simply didn't want to sign off on it because he was pocketing her tax money while making it appear that she was the one failing to pay. FancyCat11 wasn't about to let this financial manipulation slide. Monday morning, she dropped her resignation letter on his desk and walked straight into the offices of the Internal Revenue Service. There, she provided all the evidence she had gathered, and the IRS quickly discovered that despite withholding tax from her paychecks, her former boss had never paid a single penny to the government under that business name. As you might imagine, the IRS was not pleased by this discovery. But FancyCat11 wasn't satisfied with merely alerting the tax authorities. She proceeded to contact all her former boss's long-standing business partners, informing them that the IRS was about to conduct a thorough investigation of his company and suggesting they might want to distance themselves to avoid potential association. After the IRS finished its investigation, the business began to crumble. Each time FancyCat11 walked past her former workplace, she noticed the office looking increasingly empty and unkempt. Within a year, it had closed permanently. The morale of this story? Don't steal from your employees and always pay your taxes. Number 4. Revenge of the fumes. Being a single parent means making difficult compromises, often living in less than ideal accommodations due to financial constraints. Reddit user Galera1 was managing as best they could in a small, drafty apartment with their 4-year-old child. The situation was tolerable until a nightmare neighbor moved in next door. This neighbor owned a heavily modified car that he treated with more care than most people show their children. The modifications were so extensive that the engine required 10 to 15 minutes to warm up, during which time it would spew thick, noxious exhaust fumes. Ordinarily, Galera1 would have ignored this inconvenience, but the neighbor's assigned parking space was directly outside their child's bedroom window, and the toxic fumes were making the 4-year-old physically ill. Attempting to resolve the situation amicably, Galera1 politely asked if the neighbor could warm up his car elsewhere in the parking lot. Rather than showing basic human decency, the neighbor exploded in rage, screaming that he didn't care about the child's health and refusing to move his precious vehicle. Knowing that an official complaint would likely go nowhere, and lacking the financial resources to relocate, Galera1 began plotting an affordable revenge. The next day, they purchased a squeezy bottle of Gatorade and broke a couple of eggs into it. Then, noticing some fresh dog excrement nearby, they added that to the mixture and left the concoction in the sun for several days to develop into what can only be described as a chemical weapon in liquid form. Early one morning, on what promised to be an exceptionally hot day, Galeran took their malodorous creation and approached the offending vehicle. Fortunately for their plan, the car was old enough to have triangle vent windows, which the driver had carelessly left open. Galera1 sprayed the contents of their bottle through the vent, coating the interior with the vile liquid before discarding the evidence and returning to bed. Hours later, they were awakened by the satisfying sound of their neighbor's anguished cries. Looking outside, they saw him gagging beside his car, desperately trying to locate the source of the overwhelming stench. He grabbed a bucket of soapy water and began frantically scrubbing the seats, attracting a crowd of curious onlookers. When his cleaning efforts proved futile, he resorted to removing both the driver and passenger seats entirely, dumping them unceremoniously into a nearby dumpster. With at least 30 people watching and laughing, the humiliated car enthusiast then drove away, seated on the bare metal floor of his now seatless vehicle. Galera 1 never saw the car again, proving that sometimes the best revenge doesn't require money, just creativity, patience, and a strong stomach. Number 3. Kidney comeback siblings are supposed to support each other through life's challenges. But some family relationships are irreparably toxic from the start. Reddit user Ryan had the misfortune of having a twin brother named Sebastian, who bullied him mercilessly throughout their childhood. Worse, because Sebastian was clearly the favorite son, their parents consistently turned a blind eye to his cruelty. Sebastian's torment went beyond typical sibling rivalry. He constantly put Ryan down, blamed him for his own misdeeds, and encouraged his friends to join in the psychological warfare. The situation reached its breaking point when Ryan realized he was bisexual around age 18. With strictly conservative parents, he kept his relationship with a boy named Daniel secret. Unfortunately, Sebastian spotted the couple holding hands in public and, true to his nature, immediately reported this to their parents. Not content with simply outing his brother, Sebastian actively convinced their parents to kick Ryan out of the house, a campaign in which he succeeded. Left homeless and completely cut off from his family, Ryan somehow survived and rebuilt his life. Fast forward approximately 10 years. Ryan and Daniel are now happily married, living a fulfilling life far removed from the family that had rejected them. Then unexpectedly, Ryan receives a call from one of the few relatives he still speaks with, urgently requesting his presence at the hospital. Upon arrival, Ryan is greeted by his parents, who appear suspiciously delighted to see him after a decade of silence. Then he sees Sebastian lying in a hospital bed, clearly unwell. The situation becomes clear. Sebastian, having lived an excessive lifestyle that damaged his health, urgently needs a kidney transplant. The waiting list is longer than his remaining lifespan, but Ryan, as his identical twin, would be a perfect donor match. After years of abuse and abandonment, Sebastian and his enabling parents simply expected Ryan to surrender an organ to save his tormentor's life. Ryan's response was devastatingly simple: no. Shocked by this refusal, Sebastian called in their parents, who begged Ryan to reconsider. Ryan coldly reminded them of every instance they'd remained silent while Sebastian abused him, culminating in their decision to disown him for his sexuality. He pointed out that they had never cared for any part of him. Why should they suddenly value his kidney? With nothing more to say, Ryan turned and walked out, leaving his family to face the consequences of their past cruelty. Sometimes the most painful revenge requires no action at all, just the courage to say no when those who hurt you come seeking help. Number 2, serving attitude. Working in food service exposes you to the worst of humanity, particularly those customers who believe their money entitles them to mistreat those serving them. In 2010, Reddit user SpangyPH was managing a pizzeria and preparing to close for the evening when shouting and crying erupted from the front of the establishment. A group of belligerent men had forced their way in after closing time, demanding service. When the young server explained that they were closed, the men verbally abused her to the point of tears. SpangyPH attempted to intervene, confirming that yes, they were indeed closed, but the men insisted that the customer is always right and refused to leave until they received their food. Exhausted and frustrated, SpangyPH instructed the staff to reactivate the ovens while he took the distressed server aside to comfort her. Once the kitchen was operational again, the team proceeded to prepare the food with some very special additions. One staff member reached into the grease trap, extracting a handful of filthy, rancid grease, which was liberally smeared onto the dough. Others contributed bodily fluids and even hair from intimate areas, all concealed beneath a generous layer of tomato sauce and toppings. They served this contaminated creation to the rude customers, who smugly believed they had prevailed in the confrontation. The staff watched with disgusted satisfaction as the men consumed every last bite of their specially prepared pizza. So remember, if you enjoy your food free from bodily fluids and restaurant waste, perhaps consider treating service workers with basic human dignity. Number 1, getting the itch. Our number 1 spot goes to a revenge tale so meticulously executed that it borders on psychological warfare. Reddit user Dose married his childhood sweetheart, supporting her academic pursuits while he completed his master's in engineering. When she was offered a 6-week research trip to Jamaica to earn extra money, he encouraged her to go, even taking additional work to match her earnings while she was away. Upon her return, one of her fellow students informed Dos that his wife had been intimately involved with their professor throughout the trip. Initially skeptical, Dos eventually checked her emails and discovered not only evidence of the affair, but also messages mocking him for his ignorance. For weeks, he maintained the facade of an oblivious husband, noticing that studying late had become code for rendezvous with the professor. Rather than confronting them immediately, he devised an elaborate plan for revenge. Dos and his wife regularly prepared homemade personal lubricant, which they enhanced with a certain herbal substance. Guessing that the illicit couple was making use of this product, he prepared a new batch with one additional ingredient, poison ivy extract. A few days later, when his wife left for another study session, Dos altered her phone contacts, swapping his number with the professor's. When she returned home and showered, he waited for the inevitable. The next morning, thinking she was texting the professor, she sent a message to Dos saying, "I'm super itchy. Are you okay?" Dos, preparing breakfast downstairs, responded as the professor, "I'm sorry, but I've got herpes, and I guess you do now too." He continued, claiming he was interested in a younger assistant and wanted to end their affair. His wife stormed downstairs, ate breakfast in angry silence, then rushed out the door. Dos seized this opportunity to delete her entire thesis from her laptop before following her. She went directly to the professor's office, demanding to see him immediately. When Dos entered the office, she was publicly berating the bewildered professor for giving her herpes, creating a spectacular scene in front of the entire department. The aftermath was devastating. Dos filed for divorce, receiving most of their assets due to his wife's public admission of infidelity. The professor was dismissed from the university for violating the code of conduct and reduced to teaching high school. And perhaps most fittingly, his ex-wife never completed her doctorate. Sometimes revenge is best served with a side of poison ivy. And there you have it, 10 tales of vengeance that went far beyond an eye for an eye, veering straight into nuclear territory. Also, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video, where we'll bring you more stories of human nature at its most calculatingly vindictive. And if you know someone with revenge on their mind, share this video with them. It might just convince them to reconsider. As always, stay kind, stay ethical, and remember, what goes around doesn't just come around, sometimes it comes back with reinforcements. This is Wow Amazing, signing off until next time.